The stars stretched endlessly across the void, a glittering ocean of light in the cold darkness of space. Among the twinkling points, the vast warships of the Scytheran Empire glided with silent grace, their polished surfaces reflecting distant suns. The Empire was proud, ancient, and feared. For centuries, they had ruled countless systems, their strength unquestioned, their technology unmatched. Every species that had dared to resist them had fallen, and their royal forces, known as the Crimson Guard, were legends whispered across the galaxy. On the edge of Scytheran space, near a cluster of unclaimed systems, a small group of ships moved cautiously. They were nothing compared to the massive fleets of the Scytherans. These ships belonged to humans, a species the Scytherans considered primitive and slow. The humans were part of a reconnaissance unit, sent to explore and gather information about alien activity. Their ships were small, fast, and surprisingly quiet, like shadows slipping between stars. Lieutenant Mara Kincaid stood on the bridge of the lead human ship, staring at the holographic map. The map showed the positions of nearby stars, the paths of patrols, and faint signals that suggested life, though nothing like the humans had seen before. Her team of 6 was tense but focused. Each of them knew the risks. A single mistake could mean annihilation. Yet there was excitement in the air too. Humans had always thrived under pressure, and Mara knew this mission would test them in ways they could not yet imagine. Lieutenant, sensors are picking up a massive fleet approaching from the Scytheran sector, reported Jensen, her communications officer. His voice steady but laced with concern. They're faster than anything we've encountered before. Distance: 50,000 kilometers, and closing. Mara's eyes narrowed. 50,000 kilometers was nothing in space terms, but the size of the fleet told her everything she needed to know. The Scytherans were coming, and they were bringing their best. She took a deep breath, her mind calculating possibilities and outcomes. "Signal them," she ordered. "We need to know what we're dealing with before they see us." The response came almost immediately. The Scytheran fleet was enormous, consisting of dozens of massive warships, each bristling with weapons and shields. Their armor glinted in the starlight, and the sheer scale of them made the human ships look like fireflies next to mountains. Mara's heart raced, but she forced herself to remain calm. "All right, team," she said, her voice firm. "We know they're strong, but they don't know us yet. Stick to the plan. Move through the asteroid field to the south. We can use the rocks for cover and strike only when we must." The human ships darted toward the dense asteroid field, weaving through jagged rocks with a grace that came from years of training. Behind them, the Scytheran fleet followed, their sensors trying desperately to detect the humans among the rocks. The humans moved like shadows, small and agile, while the Scytherans struggled to match their speed. As the two sides approached, the first clash occurred. A Scytheran destroyer fired a volley of plasma beams at the human formation, each shot capable of vaporizing a small planet. Mara's ship shuddered under the near miss, and alarms blared across the bridge. Jensen shouted over the noise, "Shields holding, Lieutenant. They're adjusting their aim." Mara's mind raced. Humans could not match the Scytherans in raw firepower. Their weapons were smaller, their shields weaker. But humans had something Scytherans did not fully understand: creativity and adaptability. "Divide and flank," she ordered. "Use the asteroids as cover. Fire only when we have the advantage." The human ships split, each taking a different path among the asteroids. One of them, piloted by Ensign Patel, darted behind a massive rock and fired a series of precision laser shots at the destroyer's engines. Sparks flew as the engines faltered, throwing the massive ship off course. Another human ship used a magnetic pulse to interfere with the shields of a cruiser, causing it to momentarily lose power. The Scytherans had never encountered such tactics. Their ships were built for frontal assaults, for overwhelming force. They had never fought shadows before, never fought opponents who used the environment, who moved unpredictably. Confusion spread among the royal fleet. Orders were given and countered, but nothing seemed to work. Every time they thought they had the humans trapped, the tiny ships would vanish and strike from another angle. On the bridge of the human lead ship, Mara's eyes sparkled with determination. "They're learning," she said. "And that's fine. Let them. Every mistake they make is another chance for us." Back on the Scytheran flagship, the Royal Command was in chaos. Admiral Vorlon, a stern and proud figure of the Scytheran royal family, watched the battle unfold through the viewport. His ships were being hit with precise strikes, and the losses were mounting. "Impossible," he muttered. "They are only a small unit. How can this happen?" The reports kept coming. Ships crippled, shields down, systems failing. The humans were hitting them where it hurt most, using ingenuity instead of brute strength. Vorlon's face darkened with disbelief and anger. He had fought countless enemies in his long life. None had ever challenged him like this. Meanwhile, Mara's team continued their relentless assault, moving with coordination that seemed almost supernatural. Each human knew the other's movements, anticipating actions before they happened. They struck, retreated, and struck again, using tactics that were simple, yet devastating. Their small numbers became an advantage, allowing them to maneuver in ways the massive Scytheran ships could not. Hours passed. The battlefield shifted constantly, with asteroids exploding, ships twisting through space, and lasers slicing through the darkness. The humans were relentless, but they were also careful, avoiding unnecessary risk. Mara knew every strike had to count. One misstep could mean the end. Finally, the Scytherans pulled back, their pride wounded and their fleet diminished. The human recon unit had not destroyed the enemy completely, but they had achieved what seemed impossible. They had survived, and they had inflicted significant damage. On the Scytheran flagship, Vorlon sat in stunned silence. We were defeated by a single recon unit?" he whispered, his voice shaking. "This is unacceptable. How can this be?" Back on the human lead ship, Mara allowed herself a small smile. They were tired, their ships battered, but they had succeeded. They had done what no one thought possible. They had faced an empire and survived. "Lieutenant," Jensen said, breaking the silence, "do you think they'll come back?" Mara shook her head. "Maybe. But if they do, they'll know something we've always known. Humans don't fight like anyone else. We adapt. We survive. And we fight for more than just victory. We fight for each other." The team shared a quiet moment of relief, looking out at the stars that had seemed so vast and dangerous only hours ago. The humans were small, insignificant in the grand scheme of the galaxy, yet they had left a mark that would be remembered by those who underestimated them. As the human ships moved silently back toward friendly territory, the Scytherans regrouped, their pride shattered and their confidence shaken. The royal family, once untouchable, was now forced to reconsider everything they thought they knew about strength, power, and intelligence. In the cold, endless void of space, one small human recon unit had shown that courage, strategy, and unity could stand against even the mightiest empire. And somewhere, deep within the Scytheran hearts, a seed of fear, and perhaps respect, had begun to grow. The battle was over for now, but the war between two very different species had only just begun. The Scytheran royal palace was a monument of cold perfection. Towers of polished metal reached into the purple sky of their home planet, and corridors gleamed with lights that never dimmed. Yet despite the beauty, inside the palace, tension filled the air like an electric storm. The Crimson Guard had returned from the outer system, their pride wounded and their spirits shaken. Admiral Vorlon paced the command hall, his steps echoing against the high ceilings. Every officer present avoided his gaze, knowing that their failures in the battle with the humans were under his unspoken judgment. The reports had come in detail: ships crippled, shields destroyed, dozens of casualties. The humans had vanished into the darkness of space, after inflicting damage far beyond what anyone expected. Vorlon clenched his fists. He had faced countless enemies in his long life, but nothing had prepared him for this. Explain this, he demanded, his voice cold yet trembling slightly. They were only a reconnaissance unit. A handful of ships. How did they do this to us? Eddie, Lieutenant General Soria, a stern woman who had trained under Vorlon's own command, stepped forward. Sir, our intelligence underestimated them. Their speed and tactics are unlike anything we have encountered. They used the asteroid fields perfectly, attacked at weak points we didn't expect, and coordinated as if they were a single mind. Vorlon shook his head. A single mind? They are humans. Little more than animals. How can such small, insignificant creatures think like this? His voice grew louder, betraying his disbelief. We have conquered worlds, destroyed fleets, and yet a few humans have humiliated the Crimson Guard. Humiliated me. Soria's expression did not change, but her eyes betrayed a hint of fear. They are more than simple creatures, sir. They are adaptable, resourceful, and brave. They fight with creativity rather than power, and they protect each other as if their lives are intertwined. That is something our soldiers do not fully understand. Vorlon slammed his fist against the table. Sparks danced across the metal surface, but the officers flinched and did not move. This cannot stand. They are a threat. They must be eliminated. And we must understand them completely. Find out everything we can about these humans. In the lower halls of the palace, other officers were already moving. Scholars, scientists, and strategists were summoned to analyze human tactics, studying data retrieved from battle sensors and survivors. The humans had left little behind, but enough for the Scytherans to piece together glimpses of their methods. The more the analysts studied, the more Vorlon realized the depth of what they faced. Humans were not only unpredictable but also fearless in the face of overwhelming odds. They adapted quickly, learned from mistakes, and used their environment as a weapon. Meanwhile, far from Scytheran space, the human Recon unit rested after their long battle. Mara Kincaid and her team gathered in the main chamber of their lead ship, a small room filled with soft lights and the quiet hum of the engines. They were exhausted, yet exhilarated. The battle had tested them to their limits, but they had survived. Jensen, the communications officer, leaned back in his chair and exhaled. I can't believe they thought they could catch us. Did you see the look on their faces in the holo transmissions? They were terrified. Mara smiled faintly. They should be. We are not the same as any enemy they have faced before. We fight for each other, not for glory or power. That is something they will never understand. Ensign Patel, who had been piloting one of the ships during the ambush, nodded. They underestimated us. That was their mistake. We may be small, but we are strong in ways they cannot measure. Their conversation was interrupted by a soft alert. Mara approached the display screen and saw a faint signal blinking in the distance. It was a message, encrypted and coming from Scytheran space. Curious, she activated the decryption protocols. The message was brief, almost polite, but carried a weight that made her pause. We have been observed. They are not finished. We must prepare for what comes next. The team exchanged looks. Mara knew that the humans had only scratched the surface of what lay ahead. The Scytherans were proud and powerful. Now that they had experienced defeat, even from a small unit, they would not forget. Back on the Scytheran homeworld, the royal family convened for a meeting. High above the city, in chambers adorned with tapestries of conquest and banners of triumph, the royals gathered. King Thalrin, a figure of immense authority and icy composure, sat at the center, surrounded by advisors and military leaders. Vorlon knelt briefly before the king, a gesture of respect, and then reported the situation. Your Majesty, the humans are unlike any species we have encountered. Our forces were humbled by a single reconnaissance unit. Their tactics are unconventional, their speed unmatched, and their courage remarkable. They are not a threat in numbers, but their ingenuity makes them dangerous. King Thalrin's eyes, cold and calculating, scanned the room. Dangerous? Explain. They adapted faster than we could respond, Vorlon continued. They used terrain, speed, and precision strikes. They fought as a single entity, anticipating our moves. Even our most elite soldiers could not predict their actions. They are small, yes, but capable of destroying a fleet, if underestimated. A murmur ran through the room. The idea that humans, primitive, young, and insignificant in the grand history of the galaxy, could best the Crimson Guard, was almost unimaginable. Yet the evidence was clear. King Thalrin leaned back in his chair, his face unreadable. So they fight differently. What else? They fight for each other, Vorlon said quietly. They do not rely on technology alone. Their bonds are strong, and their loyalty drives them to do things no machine or weapon can achieve. They are unpredictable. The king's silence filled the room with tension. Finally, he spoke. Then we must study them. We must understand them completely. They may be primitive, but they have something our empire has lost. Ingenuity born from necessity, and courage born from struggle. Prepare an observation fleet. Do not attack yet. Learn from them first. Vorlon bowed. As you command, Your Majesty. On the human side, Mara and her team continued their journey, unaware of the scrutiny growing across the galaxy. They traveled from system to system, gathering information, scouting alien activity, and ensuring that no planet fell into Scytheran hands. Each mission reinforced what they already knew. Humans were resourceful, determined, and capable of achieving the impossible when united. One night, as Mara looked out at the stars from the bridge, she thought about the battle in the asteroid field. The Scytherans had been arrogant, confident that their numbers and technology made them invincible. But humans had something else, something the Scytherans could not quantify. It was courage, intelligence, and the unwillingness to give up, even when faced with impossible odds. Jensen approached, his voice soft. Do you think they'll respect us if they see what we've done? Mara shook her head. Respect? Maybe eventually. But fear? Definitely. They've never faced anything like us before. They will remember this defeat, and they will come prepared next time. We cannot underestimate them, and they cannot underestimate us. Ensign Patel added, Whatever comes, we'll handle it. We always do. Humans don't give up. We don't run, we don't hide, and we never stop fighting for each other. Mara nodded. She knew they were small. But in the grand chessboard of the galaxy, even a small piece could change the course of the game. And humans had the ability to move in ways no one expected. Back on Scythera, the royal family and the scientists continued their study. Data from the battle was analyzed, patterns of human behavior were dissected, and strategies were simulated again and again. Every time they reviewed the battle, the conclusion was the same. Humans were extraordinary, unpredictable, and dangerous not because of numbers or weapons, but because of something far more powerful, their minds and hearts. As days turned into weeks, Scytheran pride shifted into obsession. The royal family could not shake the memory of their defeat. Every officer, scholar, and leader pondered the same question. How could a small human recon unit achieve what no other enemy had? And far away, Mara's team continued their quiet work, unaware that their actions were already reshaping the galaxy. Every decision they made, every mission they completed, became part of a story that the Scytherans would tell for generations, a story of fear, awe, and a grudging respect for a species they had once dismissed. In the darkness of space, between stars and silence, one simple truth became clear. Humans were not what the galaxy expected. They were small, yes, but they were capable of greatness, and Scythera, with all its power, was only beginning to understand the challenge it now faced. The humans were survivors, explorers, and warriors. They were unpredictable, courageous, and relentless. And soon, the Scytherans would learn that underestimating them was the greatest mistake an empire could ever make. The humans had grown used to the quiet hum of their ships, the soft glow of control panels, and the endless stretch of stars outside the windows. For Mara Kincaid and her small recon unit, space had become both home and battlefield. Every day brought new discoveries, and every system tested their skills in ways no simulation ever could. Yet a shadow of caution lingered. The Scytherans, humiliated by their previous encounter, would not forget. Mara knew this. On the bridge of the lead human ship, Mara studied the latest sensor readings. "They're here," Jensen said, his voice tight with tension. "A fleet approaching. More ships than before. They're coming straight for us." Mara's eyes narrowed. "Not just coming," she said. "They're coming prepared. They've studied us. Learned our patterns. This won't be like the asteroid field." She turned to the rest of her team. "We fight smart, we fight together, and we use everything at our disposal. No mistakes. Stay sharp." As the human ships approached a dense nebula, the Scytheran fleet came into view. Dozens of massive warships glinted in the starlight, each one designed for domination and fear. Yet despite their size and firepower, the fleet moved cautiously. The Scytherans had learned from their defeat. They would not charge blindly this time. Admiral Vorland stood on the command deck of the flagship, his expression unreadable. Around him, officers watched screens displaying the positions of the human ships. "This time," Vorland said quietly, almost to himself, "we will not be outwitted. They are clever, yes, but we are stronger. We will strike with precision, and we will finish this." The first exchange was calculated. Scytheran cruisers fired sweeping plasma volleys across the nebula, attempting to flush the humans out of hiding. Mara's team had anticipated this. Their ships twisted and spun among the thick clouds of gas and dust, lasers deflecting and shields absorbing the worst of the energy. One by one, the humans launched countermeasures, creating false signals and cloaked decoys that misled the alien sensors. "Keep moving," Mara ordered. "They'll try to herd us into a trap. Don't let them." The Scytheran ships adjusted, trying to corner the humans. They were fast, but the human ships were faster. They darted through narrow passages, skimming dangerously close to massive gas formations that could crush a miscalculated vessel. Using the nebula as both shield and weapon, the humans struck at weak points on the Scytheran hulls, disabling engines and sensors without exposing themselves to direct fire. Yet, the battle was not just about tactics. It was about heart. Every human in the unit fought not for glory, but for each other. When one ship came under heavy fire, another would maneuver to create an opening, drawing attention away from its companion. Every movement was precise, every decision made with the group in mind. This unity became their greatest strength. On the Scytheran flagship, Vorland watched, growing increasingly frustrated. "They are not just evading us," he growled. "They are striking with intention, coordinating as if they are one mind. How can such few creatures have such skill?" Lieutenant General Soria replied, her voice calm but tense. "They have the advantage of unpredictability. Their minds work differently from ours. They think in ways we do not expect. One unit, acting as one, can overwhelm larger forces by anticipating moves we cannot foresee." Vorland slammed his fist against the console. Sparks flew, but the officers did not flinch. "We will not lose again. Prepare the energy nets. Engage the gravity traps. Do whatever it takes. I will not allow this unit to escape again." Meanwhile, Mara's team had noticed a change in the Scytheran tactics. The enemy was cautious now, almost hesitant, yet more focused on analysis than before. Mara realized what this meant. "They've learned from the last battle," she said quietly. "They think they can trap us. They'll try to anticipate our every move. But that's what we do best, adapt." She gestured to Patel. "Take the left flank. Jensen, stay with me. We'll create a false retreat and lure them in." The plan was risky. If they miscalculated, even by a small margin, the human ships could be destroyed. Yet, it was their only chance. As they executed the maneuver, the Scytherans took the bait, following the retreating ships into a narrow corridor between two massive asteroid clusters. At the last moment, the humans turned, firing a coordinated volley that hit the Scytherans' weak points. Ships staggered under the attack, engines sputtering, shields failing. In the chaos, one Scytheran destroyer collided with an asteroid, sending fragments scattering into space. The humans used every second to escape the corridor, moving back into open space with their formation intact. Mara allowed herself a small smile. They had turned the Scytheran's caution into a trap, using the enemy's own calculations against them. On the Scytheran flagship, Vorlin's face was pale. "Impossible," he muttered. "They are too clever, too coordinated. How can such a small force manage this?" Soria placed a hand on his arm. "Sir, this is not about strength alone. They fight with intelligence, unity, and determination. They are not ordinary creatures. They are humans." Vorlin's eyes burned with disbelief. "Humans. These insignificant beings have outmaneuvered us again. I have faced wars, rebellions, and countless enemies. Yet they humble me with their actions. For the humans, the battle was tiring but exhilarating. They had survived against overwhelming odds, not through raw firepower, but through strategy, coordination, and trust. Each member of the Recon unit had performed flawlessly, knowing when to strike, when to retreat, and how to protect one another. It was not luck. It was skill. And it was human. As the human ships regrouped, Mara looked at her team. "We've made them pay for underestimating us," she said softly. "But this is only the beginning. They will not forget this, and neither should we. We must be ready for what comes next." Patel grinned. "I never thought I'd see the day when the Scytherans would hesitate before attacking. They're learning. Slowly." Jensen shook his head, smiling despite exhaustion. "Learning is one thing. Respect is another. I think they're starting to fear us." The humans did not rejoice in fear or intimidation. They had no desire to terrorize anyone. They fought to survive, to protect, and to explore. Their victories were born from necessity and courage, not cruelty. That was what made them formidable in ways the Scytherans could not comprehend. Far away, in the Scytheran royal palace, King Thalrin studied the reports from the battle. Each failure and every tactical maneuver of the humans was laid out before him. For the first time in his long reign, he paused, considering a species not through the lens of power, but through the lens of intelligence and spirit. "They are more than we thought," he said quietly. "More than we feared. And perhaps more than we respect." The royal advisors shifted uneasily. Respect for a small species was not common among the Scytherans, yet the evidence was undeniable. The humans had fought with ingenuity, coordination, and courage that surpassed expectation. The king's mind raced with possibilities. These creatures could be allies, or they could become a serious threat if ignored. Back with the humans, Mara's team continued their journey. The nebula behind them faded into darkness as new stars and new systems appeared on the sensors. Each system was a puzzle, each mission a test. Yet Mara felt a quiet confidence. Humans may be small in number and limited in technology compared to the mighty Scytherans, but they had something far more valuable: the ability to adapt, to think, and to fight as one. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, but for the human recon unit, the impossible was always possible. They had faced the might of the Scytheran Empire and survived. They had turned fear into strategy, weakness into strength, and small numbers into a force that could not be underestimated. And somewhere, in the vast halls of Scythera, the royal family realized that a new chapter in galactic history was beginning. One in which humans, with their courage and ingenuity, would change the balance of power forever. In the quiet of space, amid stars that had witnessed empires rise and fall, the humans moved forward, unaware of the full impact they had made. Yet the galaxy would remember them, not for their size or for their ships, but for the spirit that refused to yield, that refused to bend before an empire, and that fought with brilliance, courage, and unity. The battle was not over. Far from it. The Scytherans would come again, stronger, wiser, and more determined. But so would the humans, And with each encounter, the story of courage, intelligence, and perseverance would continue, a story that reminded the galaxy that the greatest strength is not always found in numbers or weapons, but in the hearts and minds of those who refuse to give up. The battle on Delta 5 slowed as smoke drifted into the sky, and the last echoes of explosions faded into the barren plains. The alien troops who survived stood in silence, unsure what to expect next. Their commanders tried to keep them steady, but fear was already spreading. None of them had expected the humans to push this far. None had imagined that a small recon team could break their entire advance. But the story was not over. Everyone, both alien and human, knew that something larger was coming. General Ralzek stood atop a damaged transport vehicle, watching the battlefield through tired eyes. His command staff around him spoke in quiet voices, discussing numbers, casualties, lost units, and failed strategies. All of it sounded distant to him. His mind kept returning to the same thought: how could humans, a species the Empire had always considered weak, move and fight with such skill? Reports from surviving soldiers described the humans as fast, clever, and strangely calm during the chaos of combat. They showed teamwork and discipline that seemed unnatural for such a young species. They adapted instantly to every change. They moved like they understood the battlefield better than anyone else. General Ralzek rubbed his temples and whispered to himself, "How can they be only a recon team?" His officers looked unsure. One of them finally spoke. "General, what are your orders? Reinforcements are asking if we can still hold Delta 5. Ralzek sighed. "We cannot win another battle like this. Not until we understand the humans." The officers exchanged uncomfortable glances but said nothing. Everyone felt the same weight in their chest. They had underestimated humans. They had attacked them like any other species, and they had paid the price. Far from the alien lines, the human strike teams regrouped around a small ridge. Their equipment was dusty and scratched, their armor dented, but their spirits were high. They had completed their mission and pushed the enemy forces back farther than command had predicted. Captain Marafin walked among her soldiers, checking on them one by one. She admired their courage and determination. They were tired, bruised, and covered in sweat, yet ready for more. That was the thing about humans, they kept going when others stopped. She looked up at the sky where the clouds were slowly turning red from the fading sunlight. She knew this was only the beginning. More alien troops would come. The Empire would not back down easily. Major Holt approached her. "Recon Command wants an update," he said. "They want to know if we can hold this position." Mara smiled faintly. "Hold it? We just took it from a whole alien battalion. I think we can stay a while." Holt laughed and nodded. "I'll tell them you said that." Their recon unit was small, only 36 soldiers now after losses, yet they had achieved what larger units had struggled to do in the past weeks. Their advantage wasn't numbers. It wasn't technology, even though human gear had improved in the last decade. Their greatest strength was something else: human stubbornness. Humans simply refused to break. Night came slowly. Fires burned across the plains, sending sparks into the air as the wind whistled between the rocks. The humans remained alert. They knew the aliens could strike again. They waited patiently, listening to the distant rumble of engines and the faint metallic hiss of damaged alien machines cooling in the dark. Across the battlefield, General Ralzek gathered his senior officers in a dim tent. A holomap glowed in the center, displaying human movements and their defensive positions. The general spoke in a low, heavy voice. "We made a mistake. We thought humans were simple. We believed the stories that humans were emotional, undisciplined, and reckless. We believed they were not ready for interstellar war." He paused, leaning on the table. "Today proved us wrong." One of the officers spoke carefully. "General, if the recon team alone dealt this much damage, then what must their full army be like?" Ralzek exhaled sharply. "That is what terrifies me." Silence fell again. Every alien in the tent understood the truth. If they could barely handle a human recon team, the arrival of human heavy forces would crush them. Yet retreating was not an option. The Empire had pride. They had never surrendered a planet to a young species. Doing so would shake their rule across the galaxy. Other species would question them. Rebellion would spread. Finally, Ralzek made a decision. "We send a message to the capital," he said. "We request the Royal Legion, not to attack but to negotiate." The officers looked shocked. The Royal Legion was reserved only for the most serious matters, and never for surrender talks. But Ralzek had no pride left to protect. He wanted to save lives. "We cannot continue this war," he said quietly. "Humans will not break. If we push harder, they will only push back twice as strong." The next morning arrived with a soft, golden glow spreading over the plains. Human sensors detected movement, but it was not an attack. A single alien transport moved forward slowly, with its weapons powered down and flags of truce waving along its sides. Captain Mara Finn narrowed her eyes as she observed it. "Well, that's new," she murmured. Major Holt stood beside her. "Looks like they want to talk." She nodded and prepared her team. A small meeting group approached the transport. Careful but confident. The alien ramp lowered with a mechanical groan, and General Ralzek stepped out. He moved with the dignity of a leader, carrying the weight of defeat on his shoulders. His expression was calm, but his eyes showed fear and respect. He spoke first. "We request communication with your higher command. We wish to discuss ending the conflict on Delta 5. The humans exchanged surprised looks. This was more than unexpected. Raising her chin slightly, Mara replied, "We can arrange that. But we need confirmation that your troops will stand down." Ralzek nodded. "They will. No more attacks." The humans relaxed slightly. They escorted him to their command post, where communication with orbit was already active. As negotiations began, a strange feeling spread among both sides. Something had shifted. The war had paused. The tension had broken. The aliens had recognized the truth. Humans were not a species that could be pushed around. After several hours, both sides agreed on a ceasefire for the planet. It was not a full peace treaty, but it was enough to stop the fighting and save countless lives. When Ralzek stepped outside the human tent, he paused and looked at the human soldiers resting nearby. Some cleaned their weapons, some joked quietly, others sat staring at the horizon. None looked like conquerors. They looked like regular people who simply refused to give up. He felt a chill. These humans did not look dangerous, yet their spirit was terrifying. It was no wonder his troops feared them. Before leaving, he turned to Captain Mara Finn. "Tell me, Captain, if humans can fight like this with only a small recon team, what would happen if your full army had arrived?" Mara looked at him calmly. "You don't want to know," she said. Ralzek felt a shiver crawl down his spine. He believed her. As his transport lifted off and headed back to alien lines, he whispered to himself in disbelief. "We only fought a human recon unit, and we nearly lost everything." The story of Delta 5 soon spread across the Empire. Alien royals, nobles, and generals listened in horror as reports came in. They could not understand how a young species like humans could stand against them, let alone win. But the truth was simple. Humans were underestimated. Their strength was not in their technology or ships. It was in their hearts. Their refusal to back down. Their unity when facing danger. And across the galaxy, the message became clear. Never provoke humans. Never corner them. Never assume they will surrender. Because if a recon unit alone could cripple an imperial force, then the full human military would be something even the greatest empires feared. And thus, the legend of Delta 5 grew. Humans did not want war. But if one came to their door, they would face it with unmatched determination. The aliens learned the hard way, and they would never forget it.